Andrew and Jeune here with your Asian racing review, and a lot to pack in this week. We'll be heading to Hong Kong with news of big name rider switch there. Macau, the return of racing is imminent, or is it? More on that. And a magical day for Moreira in Sydney. We'll touch on his Group 1 win on the weekend. We'll start off, though, as I welcome in Michael Cox, editor of the Asian Racing Report. Michael, in Singapore, and the Singapore Turf Club have responded to Michael Clements, who obviously issued that statement. He'll be leaving Singapore a little bit earlier than originally planned.
Yeah, nice to join you, Andrew. I feel like they might have responded to us. We came on here last week and asked that we'd love to hear from the Singapore Turf Club officials. They've hired a PR firm to issue a statement on their behalf, quite lengthy, a little bit there, a few promises. Let's see how much substance there is behind that. Some interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, well, we've got the statement here, and I won't read it out. You'll find all of it there on the website's Asian Racing Report, but just lift a couple of the statements out. And they say, Mr Clements has expressed his concern for the commitment to ensuring the welfare of all workers and horses under him. Even if he winds up his company, we will support him in this. We thank Mr Clements for his valuable contributions and wish him every success in his next adventure. Our emphasis is to support trainers and horse owners to take care of their workers and horses, whilst facilitating the community to keep racing going until October 2024. Of course, that's the end date for racing here in Singapore. But they go on to say, we've conveyed to our trainers our commitment to support the racing community, including a multi-million-dollar package to help them and their workers to transition to the next phase of their careers and to ensure horse welfare and the responsible rehoming of racehorses. And just as an aside, their racing will continue. It would normally stop during December in Singapore, but they'll continue through December this year, with it being the final year.
Isn't that nice of them to give them let them work through the Christmas break and keep on going? Well, I mean, it's nice to promise a multi-million-dollar package, but it's scant on detail. And throughout, we've seen a lack of communication with trainers. Now, in response to that statement, Michael Clements has spoken to the reporter Michael Lee with the Straits Times there in Singapore, and he didn't miss with his comments. So I think some of Michael's comments in the Straits Times speak to the heart of the frustration of trainers in Singapore. And look, Michael Clements is left frustrated at a wit's end, and they want to wish him well on his next adventure. This is just PR speak. His next adventure is unemployment. His next adventure, he moved there as a 20-something-year-old man. He's 57. And they pulled the rug out from under him. So wishing him well on his next adventure, that's nice. But Michael Clements has had his say in the Straits Times, and the main point of contention for the trainers is the club, still continue to let us invest in the industry and buy new horses overseas, even though they knew racing would cease. Owners, trainers, jockeys, and now staff have basically been treated as collateral damage regarding the closure of horse racing. I've supported SEC as a trainer for 25 years, and I'm grateful for the services I've derived from the success I've derived from the opportunities that my owners and the club have afforded me. But I feel the collective of how the STC has treated me over the last 3 months is morally wrong. I therefore no longer wish to support them any further. I'm done. So, I mean, if the STC want to respond to that, I've followed up with some questions via email to the PR firm, because the Singapore Turf Club officials are just gone to ground ever since this happened. They were going to ground before it happened. They knew at some stage. And the key question is, when did Singapore Turf Club officials know that racing would cease? Because the week it was announced, trainers were on the Gold Coast spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on horses that will never race in Singapore. So let's hear it. Let's see when it was, because they're in a hard spot. Because if it was months ago, they were dishonest. If it was weeks before the announcement, that's incompetent. And that would speak to why there's been no plan, and why trainers like Michael Clements, who is playing a leading role and highly responsible person, taking the responsibility as leaders of the Trainers Association, has said, I'm done.
He is obviously speaking on his own behalf there, but probably you can feel the emotion, I think, in the words, quite possibly. It speaks for others as well. And probably worth noting, somewhat ironically, maybe, that Linz Kosciuszko won on the weekend, did it in some style, and looks to certainly go out on a high.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we were talking about this great horse and what he's achieved and first up and in racing in Singapore and all that it could be? But when a trainer like Michael Clements leaves, and when a PR firm is hired to put out statements like they have, promising a multi-million-dollar package. And look, I have spoken to many trainers and jockeys and officials within the STC. They're frustrated, upset. They feel like they've been let down in the dark. And look, maybe the officials there would have been better served hiring someone capable of transitioning racing out through this difficult period rather than a PR firm to try and make it sound like everything's okay. It's not.
And it won't change it in the long term, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see the actual details surrounding that multi-million-dollar package and what that entails exactly. We'll keep moving though, Michael, into to Hong Kong next, and it's Tony Cruz. You can read about him in the South China Morning Post. The SCMP quoted Tony this week talking about California Spangle, of course, and his plans going forward. Zac Purton was on board him last year, of course, winning in December as well, the International Le Mans. But Tony quoted there saying, Zac is picking and choosing his rides. He wants to see how Beauty Eternal goes first before he decides. Obviously, between the two horses, we've got to confirm a jockey, they said, someone who can stay with the horse, and that jockey will be one Hugh Bowman.
Yeah, we've talked a lot early in the season in our pre-season preview podcast here on Asian Racing Review about Hugh Bowman's tremendous start to the season and how could he be a challenger. I think he could at least be an annoyance to Zac, and this is where we see it, that he is seen as a equal, he's not far behind Zac in terms of the pecking order, in terms of putting him on in a big race. We've seen it time and again with Hugh. He has that reputation. Perfect jockey for him. And it's got me thinking that Zac, one thing in Hong Kong, could we be seeing the Zac backlash? And there's nothing against Zac. Zac's greatest strength throughout the years has been the way he's been able to manage relationships, the way he's been able to claw his way back from like the Moreira dominance for the first 4 seasons that Moreira arrived. Zac chose a different path. He made good connections with top owners like the Su family and the Quocks, and rode in these big races, and the Liang family who owned California Spangle. But it's hard to keep everybody happy all of the time in Hong Kong. And we saw it with Moreira when Zac did beat Joao Moreira for the championship. There's just a little bit of this line from Cruz I heard repeated many times by trainers. Yeah, as Joe's letting them down, he's picking and choosing, and having that, array of rides that you can choose in one race. Sometimes it's a case of, heavy is the head that wears the crown. It can be tough to be the hunted rather than the hunter. And maybe Zac's getting a little bit of a taste of that now.
Yeah, I think Zac is playing a game that's you'll see the world over. His jockey's trying to find the best horse in each particular race, give him the best chance of winning. But I can see perfectly Tony's point of view. And do you take a risk and wait and maybe get Zac? But if you don't, then who do you get? Or do you lock in Hugh Bowman now? I mean, it's a little bit of a no-brainer for Cruz and connections.
Yeah, I don't know. I love it. I love this aspect of Hong Kong racing, and I'm sure Zac will be fine. He's a big boy, and maybe he'll be happy to ride Beauty Eternal. Of course, Beauty Eternal, this is the background to it. Beauty Eternal, owned by the Quoc family, with whom Zac's had a great association. They spent a lot of money on horses. He rode Beauty Generation, and then trained by John Size, who's his main provider of support. So it's not just a simple case. It's never a simple case of which is the best horse over a mile on the next race they race in. You can't pick and choose. You can't switch. It's not that easy, especially now with Hugh Bowman there and just riding so well.
And it probably should be worth pointing out as well that Zac was very loyal to the connections last year. California Spangle, he stuck with him throughout the entire year as well. Of course, that brilliant win in December as well. So that's definitely worth the story, worth following, as is Macau, Michael, as well. They're due to return to action this Friday night.
Yeah, this Friday night, but a lot of uncertainty there amongst participants, officials. We saw recently Stanley Chin, the former Hong Kong jockey and trainer in Macau, not licensed for this season. Just still the problem there is, okay, there's a schedule. There's a racing schedule laid out once per week until December 31. And then strangely flipping back to like a full schedule afterwards. There's a strong rumour that racing won't continue beyond the end of this year. A lot of conjecture, and I'd rather stay away from the rumours and what could happen. But the bottom line is that horse imports to Macau are still frozen. Horses aren't coming in. While ever horses aren't coming into Macau, there's huge uncertainty about the even short to medium term future, let alone the long term future of racing in Macau.
Yeah, so after Friday night, in theory, one meeting per week, every Saturday, in actual fact, through October. And it does, to a certain extent, it just comes down, if we were going to continue, it just comes down to horse numbers and it being sustainable or not.
Yeah, and a very few trainers. I think there's only 12 trainers in Macau at the moment. So wait and see. It'd be terrible, sad if it was to close, but it'd also be sad to see it sort of drudge along and sort of maybe have integrity problems or welfare problems. Hopefully they can maintain that ship right until whenever we see an end.
All right. Okay. Looking back to last weekend in Australia, and Joao Moreira were flying visits, had success the day he landed. Well, the day he started last Wednesday at Warwick Farm, and that continued with the Group 1 Golden Rose on the weekend for Chris Waller. Yeah,
he's got a great association with this horse. 3 rides, 3 Group 1s. Didn't he look in trouble there with like around 200 to go? He didn't look like he was travelling well enough to win, let alone like find a gap. Joe's worry was he find the gap, but just a real Joao Moreira special. And thoughts go out to Dylan Gibbons as well, beating a short head into second in a Group 1. And if I could say anything to Dylan Gibbons, it'd be like, you're in rare company because, welcome to the world of Zac Purton, Dettori, Brett Preble, Douglas White. Moreira's done it to the best of them, appearing from nowhere and just snatching that win in the last stride.
Yeah, and Dylan's picked himself up he already had the ride, but now with Buenos Noches, we'll be riding him in the Everest, the first apprentice to ride in the Everest in just a couple of weeks' time as well. Yeah. But that was the Golden Rose on the weekend. What are Joe's plans moving forward from here? There was a mention, I suppose you always think about it as well, with a horse like Militarize, a 3-year-old, he'll go to the Guineas next, that the Cox Plate might be on the agenda, but he'd get a very lightweight there, possibly too light for Joe.
Yeah, he does seem an ideal Cox Plate horse, doesn't he? Like if you're picking a 3-year-old that would go there, can get that distance and just wind up like he does. But I strongly doubt that Joao Moreira would be riding in a Cox Plate. It's a day before the Tenno Show Autumn. Moreira rides in Sydney this weekend. It's his birthday this week, actually, the 27th. He will head back to Brazil after that and then on to Argentina for some Group 1 rides there and return to Japan on October 21. So there's a big run of Group 1 races through this period. It'd be very difficult for one, logistically, to get back to Melbourne the day before a temperature autumn and be able to be back and ride. He'd miss a day in Tokyo, and also the weight. Joao Moreira, towards the end of his stint in Hong Kong, I mean, so much was going on. It was reported, but he was really struggling with his weight. He wasn't riding the 115s, let alone the 110 that it had required to get down to take the full weight allowance for Militarize.
And as you mentioned, Japan Sprinter Stakes is on this weekend. I've understood as well, while Joe is here in Australia, they've asked him to go into the apprentice school as well to talk to the apprentices there and offer some advice. Obviously, it's one of those situations. I always wonder with these top-class sportsmen, some of them, it's very hard to put into words what Joe does on the back of a horse, but it'd be a great experience for all your apprentices there to spend some one-on-one time with him.
I think Joao Moreira would be there's probably a misconception with Joe that he's a natural, that there's this idea that he's just a natural rider and how could he teach someone to ride like he does. But I think he'd be a great teacher. As an apprentice, I've heard people say in Brazil that he was the worst rider they have ever seen. That if you go back there and you ask them in Sao Paulo, Ivan Quintana was his first boss, who was a great jockey himself, a heavyweight jockey. And Ivan Quintana just told Joe to go away when he first turned up to his stable. But he persisted and came back and basically taught Joe to ride piece by piece, how to sit, how to hold the rein, like the most basic, rebuilt Joe as a jockey. And so I think maybe he'd be a great teacher. It's something he's interested in doing in the future, and that's certainly a great boon for the apprentices back there. Just coming back to Zac Purton as well, and Everest rides. He's also been booked to ride in secret for Godolphin. So interesting news there. Be a chance in the race, and Zac, taking advantage of the more relaxed rules that allow jockeys from Hong Kong to head overseas.
Absolutely. All right, more on that as we build up to the big one there in Sydney. What else are we looking out for on the website this week?
Just some great stuff in Japan. Of course, we've got the Arc on Sunday. Japan with a runner there. We've got the Sprinters Stakes on Sunday as well. Hong Kong continues. Some great features there from David Morgan. Go and check it out. And lots more coming up on Asian Racing Report. And
podcast-wise, so you've had another sit-down?
Yeah, I had a sit-down with Harry Bentley. He's a very articulate young man, 31-year-old, with a lot of experience around the world. He's ridden in England, America, Ireland, and the Middle East extensively, a 6-time champion in Qatar. We really just had a quick chat, but it was a very insightful one about like what it's like to ride in races in Hong Kong, what makes it so unique and challenging.
All right, great stuff. We'll have a great weekend, and we'll catch up next week.
Thanks, Andrew.
Michael Cox, editor of the Asian Racing Report. That's it for this time round. Like and subscribe. Keep following us all the social channels as well, and tuning in as well for more from Asian Racing Review.